So welcome attendees to the December edition of AMAASE, Ask Me Anything About Social Enterprise. This is your opportunity to ask those burning social entrepreneurial questions. My name is Christine Spottiswoode. I normally fill my days as the project lead for ABC, and today I am honored to act as your host again for this session. I will start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from my home in Devon, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route for the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and the Stoney Nakoda. I would like to acknowledge all of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I believe a treaty is an inheritance, a responsibility, and a relationship, and I hope that recognizing our status as treaty people is one small action of many that will help us to be good neighbors to one another, good stewards of the land, and good ancestors to all our children. I welcome you to share in the chat if you are joining us from elsewhere, either in Alberta or across the globe we've had in past sessions. So AMAASE is our monthly opportunity for members of the ecosystem to access and ask questions of our panel member of capacity builders. We hold this on the second Wednesday of every month from 3:30 to 5 on Mountain Standard Time. These sessions are designed with our audience and attendees being the driver of the discussion. So this is your time to ask questions. That's what we are all here for. And I do welcome you to start gathering or getting your questions ready so we can make the most of our time together while I introduce our panel guests. So in no specific order, we have Dan Overall from the Trico Foundation, Brittany Kurlick from the Trico Foundation, Jeff Loomis from Momentum, Meredith Parrish from Innovate Calgary, and Jane Bisbee from the Social Enterprise Fund. And they've all given a wave. And so I will open the floor and get us started and invite you, the audience, to share your questions. You're welcome to unmute. We're a fairly small group today, so I don't think it'll get too chaotic. You can raise your virtual hand under the reactions button. There should be a raise hand option for you. As well, you can type your questions into the chat and I can put them in the queue and then we'll reach out to you there as well. We do encourage you to turn on your video if you are welcome. And I see Julie has raised her hand, so she can get us going. Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you so much. This might be just a really basic, silly, and annoying question, but when you're getting started, if you're working from zero and you want to kind of go up from there, obviously there's a lot of things involved. So it's not just having a good idea and knowing that you have something that could potentially translate, but it's letting people know what you have, etc. So obviously, no such thing as a silly question. Well, I thank you for that. Maybe it's just a silly person asking the question then. But that's kind of a mystifying sort of thing because there's so many parts involved. So I know that there's a lot of potential answers to this, but if you were to give maybe a sequence of kind of the most important events, taking it from concept idea through to what needs to be done to actually get the word out to the right people, do the right things to actually start it being something meaningful. So that's, yeah, I know there's a lot of parts, so bear with me with that.
Does anyone have a keen interest in a first response for Julie's question? Meredith.
I maybe am just wanting to respond to the question with a quick question. You mentioned you had a couple of colleagues who were maybe going to join you on this call. And so I'm just curious, is this a social enterprise that you're getting started in the context of an existing organization, or like, can you just provide us a little bit more around the context of that?
Yeah, so I work for the Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers, also known as EMCN. And we have been kind of doing what we do for the past 40 years. We are a nonprofit and we have funders. And as anybody knows who works with funders, funding comes and goes and you do what you can with it during the time, but you can develop something and then all of a sudden the funder either, by design or, just they have a mandate where they can only give people so much funding for a certain period of time, then they have to bring their funding to another area. we're looking to actually create a social enterprise that will help us sort of sustain some of the programs that we know need funding within our organization. And we don't really want to necessarily have to always rely on getting funders to do that. So one of the things that, and I don't want to steal any time, but the thing that we're looking at is working with the employer aspect of it, and kind of things like helping employers understand how to be more receptive and things like that to the newcomer talent that they're bringing on board. So right now I've created videos for a YouTube channel specifically designed for employers, but we have, you know, been requested to do training, and we've done that unofficially for years, like for 40 years, but we want to kind of bring it to a more official kind of place. So hopefully that gives you enough background to kind of.
Jane, I see you unmuted. Do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I was going to say this actually, well, it does make sense. First of all, we have had lots of conversations around this table about what is a social enterprise. I'm going to suggest you already are one. In fact, we invested in you. You guys had a loan from us. So I'd say stop worrying about that. And what you're talking about is taking a skill set that you have already inherent in what you do and saying, okay, can we monetize this in a different way? It's around how you think about the service that you give and that you already are doing, and taking it one step further. So when you said, so what do we do first? My immediate thought would be, okay, how many employers out there might actually be willing to pay for this? And do those employers actually have money to be able to pay for it? Because there's some people who might want to hire you, but really don't have the money to. And that gives you some place to build. It's essentially looking at the service that you provide and the skill sets you have and saying, who could we sell these to in a slightly different way that then provide service to the newcomers that you're supporting. A word of caution, sometimes corporations or who you think is going to end up being your customer might be all gung-ho because they think this is a good idea and then don't actually show up and buy the services. We actually put money into to an organization that was doing just that kind of thing. They thought they had everybody on board, and they even had people in companies, major corporations, sitting on their advisory committee to this service that they were presenting, who then didn't buy the service. So people can talk a good line sometimes. So how do you find out whether they're really customers? But I would think the first exercise I would think is going through whether or not this is a business idea that has a customer who can and would be willing to pay you to do it. That's probably where I would start. And Brittany, you might have some ideas around, or Meredith, around some of the early appraisal kinds of things that people could do to get to that exercise.
Yeah, I just want to add on to I think that piece around it's really easy for organizations to say, yes, we want to pay for your service. And it's a little bit harder to actually transition them to paying for that service, especially if you're coming in with something that's socially good, because it doesn't cost them anything to say yes, and they feel good about it. And we have worked with some organizations as well who maybe they get 10% of the organizations they actually talk to. So that piece of maybe even letters of intent, and also organizations that are willing to learn with you as you sort of build this out and develop it, because you might come up with a standardized package, but a lot of it's going to have to be tweaked and maybe specialized based on the specifics of that organization. So thinking about, how can we test and learn and try this out and actually see what these companies are looking for, or what does it take on our end to actually deliver this, and how much specialization, how much staff time, because not only do you want to understand, will people be willing to pay for it, but also what do we need to charge for it, right? In order to balance those things. So you want to think your social aspects, but you also want to think about your business aspects as well. And so that piece around customers, but also then people who can maybe act as almost friendly wise skeptics and can help you be willing to kind of have very honest conversations about that journey is important. And the last thing is, I think the key is really knowing your goals of where you want to go, because not every customer is going to be the right customer, right? Not all of them are going to be the right fit. So you may get some that just want like really intense specialization, and that might not be in your wheelhouse or in your capacity operationally to offer. And so that piece of talking to, who's going to learn with us and grow with us at this early stage, and who's going to help us kind of test some of those assumptions, I think is really key, and kind of figuring out where you're going and where that, we use the mountain analogy, the top of the mountain is for you. And then where do those key players come in?
Jeff, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you want to add?
Yeah, Julie, so in the spirit of Jane's point of viewing yourselves as a social enterprise, I think it's really important, as Brittany said, is like be really focused on what your ends are that you want to achieve. So if it's really only about making money, that can take you down one path. If it's more about like a blended return, that's a different path. That's more of an integrated model. So be really clear. I think nonprofit needs to think about like, what are they trying to achieve? And if it's only about making money, just go in recognizing that you may not make anywhere near as much money as you actually think when you think of the total cost required to actually run something like a business. So another kind of initial step that you could think about is like, who can you learn from that's been on that path? So one organization that has run a social enterprise that doesn't make any money for years, but it is a social enterprise in the sense that it's based on selling a service. And I thought of them because of the Center for Newcomers connection, the Center for Newcomers here in Calgary that's run ethnicity catering forever. So they're trying to move it towards more enterprising so it can make money. So just talking with them about their journey and operating ethnicity catering now for over a decade may be helpful. And then an organization like Atira Property Management came to mind for me in the Lower Mainland. And I don't know the status of Atira's property management, but Atira Women's Resource Society set up Atira Property Management years and years ago, like probably over a decade ago, with the sole purpose of taking something they're good at, managing properties, and monetizing it and making money and essentially becoming a commercial property manager. And it, from last I heard, which is dated, it did actually make money. Like it was actually returning profit back to Atira Resource Society, but they structured it as a subsidiary because they wanted to run it very much of a business that they owned. And so that's where then a subsidiary, because their goal was make money, a subsidiary made sense. Ethnicity catering, less of a goal about making money, more of the blended idea of creating jobs for newcomers, kind of made sense in some ways to have it in-house and not a subsidiary model. So I'd say first is focus on what the ends are, the big goals, as Brittany said, and then learn from others as an initial step before you go down the path too far.
I'm gonna actually take a step back from the great answers. So very basically, what we found, would-be social entrepreneurs struggle very fundamentally with two things. One, understanding the basics of social entrepreneurship and what the possibilities are and the dynamics. So we've actually created a curriculum that will go through examples and provide you with some tools. Just understand, again, the basics as well as the incredible possibilities, because there's some really imaginative things where you go, whoa, I never would have thought we could achieve that type of social impact through business models. So we have this rethinking social entrepreneurship training. The second thing we notice with beginning social entrepreneurs and even ones that have been in the journey for a long time, they needed training that opened their minds as to what the signals the universe was trying to send them. So for example, there's lots of customer discovery courses you can go through. But if you're not opened your mind as to what customers are actually telling you and you're just hearing what you want to hear, you're wasting that kind of great training. So we want to create something where it trained social entrepreneurs to fully be open to what, again, what the universe is trying to tell them and what, friendly wise skeptics that Brittany talked about. We're also finding that a lot of social enterprises will get like these market studies from consultants, but because they don't have the process for how to actually break it down and to experiment in a way that's frugal and safe, again, they can't maximize it. And it's been a while, so I'm gonna refer to one of my favorite quotes from Jane when she was asked, what does she look for in someone she's going to invest? And she says, are you open to your baby being ugly? And how do you know what you don't know? And again, we call this second program Maximizing Potential. It trains you to do that. So we find that these two fundamental bedrocks are really good for then starting you on the journey of working through all the things that have been talked about, and even actually figuring out how you're going to get advice, right? Because of the people you may consult, you may get go this way, go that way, right? How are you going to filter out which advice you kind of want to really listen to? So it's really those basics. And I can say our programming is all recorded. It's online. You don't even have to register. It's there. And if you have any questions from it, should you want to examine it more, feel free to let us know. And we're here to help you out.
Awesome, thank you. I feel like that question was Social Enterprise 101, and we'll just send that little snippet of the recording off to everyone. Julie, was that helpful? Was there any other clarifying questions you had?
Yeah, and I especially what resonated with me was what Jeff said about a blended, because I think that just by the nature of who the organization is, I think that is probably what we best kind of associate with, right? I think that there's a lot of things that are kind of really good there, and actually most of all, it helped me check off that we were already on the right path. Like we got letters of intent because we just actually applied for some funding that we're hoping we're going to get for seed money to lay down the groundwork. But these are things that we've done with organizations literally for the past 40 years, but we don't have an official department. We don't have, and that's kind of what we want to kind of move towards. And so I think that blended thing for us is so important, but I didn't realize that there was really, a word for that. And I was like, that seems a little bit more, kind of realistic to what we want to do. So I have like a bazillion more questions, but that like really does kind of help. Everybody contributed something great. I don't want to take over here. So I'm going to shut up and listen to what everybody else has to ask and then just gather that stuff like a sponge. So I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to add one thing to the blended question, because you mentioned you have some customers already. The blended thinking sometimes makes one forget that your government colleagues or your granting colleagues are actually customers. Right? So don't forget to think about them in that way. And also, please God, cost it properly. Actually build the real cost of doing this into your projections. People really forget sometimes and think of themselves as breatharians, like they don't have to actually pay people to do the work. So really think through carefully what the costing side is when you're pushing this around as an idea.
That's a really important thing. We had to do a budget recently to send to the grant for this, and it was a real eye opener. But we're kind of working with internal kind of capabilities right now. We're hoping eventually we might be able to bring things on board, but right now most of us are taking on these things in additional to other areas that we're working in the beginning. So this is kind of the genesis of this, is working with what we already have. There are some other costs that we're going to add to this, but I think that was a real eye opener for us too, Jane. So I agree. Like it was a point where we're like, ooh, we had a much different idea. And as we're doing the research, it really is making things be much more real. And so we have to be real with ourselves of what's possible and what's not. So yeah, that's absolutely super important. So thank you.
And I would just add, we're talking about blends. And so the tools that Dan mentioned, one of our tools is called the Blender, which actually brings together the social and the entrepreneurial and talks about some of those pressure points. So can you pass the costs off onto your customers? And if you can't, what does that look like, right? It doesn't mean you don't go forward with the idea. It just means like, let's be aware of some of these pressure points and these inherent costs that our social model is maybe bringing into the project, or why our customers are purchasing our project, I think are all really sort of key things as you go through that. So keeping that in mind, and then keeping in mind sort of, right, like thinking about what do you have to deliver this opportunity and what does it cost us? And then thinking about how the pieces come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, agreed. Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. That's very, like I said, part of it is me checking off and knowing I'm in the right direction. And then the other side, I'm like, ooh, that's really interesting. We're going to have to pay more attention to that. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Julie. And as you go through your journey, we are here every month. So you are welcome to bring your questions every month and access the knowledge of this great panel.
I can jump in while we're kind of waiting for others.
Sure.
And it's actually riffing off of what Julie said in that, this may be a stupid question, or maybe I'm finding in this space, people feel that all the time. And it's really, social entrepreneurship is still pretty new, and we're all learners here. So really, everybody out there, just believe me when I say there's really no such thing as a stupid question, that we're all kind of learning our way. And I'm pretty sure if you have the question, there's lots out there who have the question as well. So if you don't have questions, that's okay. But if you do have questions, please do not hold back, because it's these types of conversations that benefit not only us as a panel, but your fellow audience members. So feel free to step up and ask those questions.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon, everyone. My wife and I are exploring kind of in the strategic phase of an urban farm in Calgary. And it really is going to bend towards supporting the healthcare system in a variety of ways. And I'm just wondering if anyone can speak kind of more high level to opportunities in the healthcare space, in mental health care support, and how have things kind of evolved or changed as the pandemic kind of continues to wind down / drag on for those sectors. So any thoughts on that space at all would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I got to ask a question. What do you mean by an urban farm in a healthcare setting? I'm lost.
So that's a great question. We kind of, at this stage, we see it in a couple of ways. One is that we would love to grow literally large quantities of food and flowers and be able to donate them to healthcare workers and secondarily patients. So imagining something like a pop-up in a hospital space, being able to give little, a moment to say thank you and here's something for you, and a little literal basket of veggies or a small bouquet or something like that to just light up someone's afternoon, or if somebody's looking for a healthy snack kind of thing. And then the other way is to have the actual farm work itself be done in a way that we encourage people to reconnect with nature, to reconnect with their community, to really make it an easy place to come and volunteer to help grow these vegetables and flowers, and to make that part of the healing experience for people. I've been making farms in Calgary for about 8 or 9 years now, and I keep talking to people having the same story, like the kind of work of working in the soil, planting food, being with other people. It goes beyond just a nice thing to do in an afternoon. It really grounds people. It really connects people with their spaces. And so having a labyrinth and meditation spaces and a very easily accessible volunteer opportunity to help the farm grow flowers and food for people who I think a lot of us agree could use a hand and a thank you. So hopefully that adds a little bit of context.
So if Christine will indulge me, 2 more clarifying questions. How much experience, Jack, have you got as an actual farmer? And second, who's the customer in this business?
So I have started or been a founding member of 3 farms at scale here in Calgary, all taking advantage of public land through the city or the province. So Grow Calgary, the Land of Dreams with CCIS, and Highfield Regenerative Farm I was all a founding member of, or lead member. And so I'm a city kid. I don't have farm experience, but I have lots of growing experience in the city and navigating those projects. And the user question, we kind of see it breaking down in a few ways. And I caught something at the end there. I think actually you said about how, like the grantors and people can even be your customers and your clients. So that was interesting, but more directly, we see it as being healthcare workers who we would like to show support of. And we have a whole lot of personal story, my wife and I, for those reasons as well, but healthcare workers who we feel are being kind of unfairly or not supported as much as they could. And also then any general public people who want to learn how to grow food, want to learn how to grow flowers, want to be able to access urban green spaces that have a different bent. That's not just a park, that's like an active and experiential healing experience.
So you use the word user, and I asked the question about customer. So I'm going to push a little further. Are these users paying the company for the experience?
Yeah, sorry, understood. So we envision one of the main customers to be small and medium-sized, companies that are looking to do team building activities. And so we would like to run very professional, very organized, very productive team building workshops for a fee to companies. And that would be one of the main client streams that we see driving the revenue and also a lot of the on the ground work.
Okay, the reason I pushed you down that particular road was because I have this kind of thing pitched to me all the time, in that there's a user, there's a beneficiary, or stakeholder that the good is being done for, but they're not really the customer of the business. And so what's really important is to have clear in your mind the difference between those two things when you're building the business. So in a way, your entire marketing and business effort will be around getting those companies who want an experiential activity for their staff and pay. So your business is not really an urban farm for the healthcare, to improve healthcare outcomes. It's about providing a service to those companies from the way you just described it. Now, nothing's ever quite that clean and tidy, but it changes the way that you build this up. So I'm not sure that the question is how is, your initial question was about the healthcare system. They're not the ones going to be paying for this, as you've described it. So it kind of doesn't matter. They'll use it, I'm sure. You'll find lots of users. But to build the business, you need to be doing the analysis around who's actually going to pay it. So your marketing would be different. You'd have two streams of things going on there. So I think you're bigger, and I could be completely wrong with this. So, but off the top of my head, I think I'd be looking at, are companies in a position now, and are there enough of them who'd be willing to pay for their employees consistently on a regular basis to make use of that. Anyway, I'll shut up and let some others weigh in.
No, thank you. That's great. I really appreciate the distinction and making it very clear. So thank you.
Yeah, and I talked about the Blender tool, and actually this tool is probably going to get at the heart of that issue. So the piece around the differentiation between customers and beneficiaries is key to understand, right? And so one side of the Blender actually talks about, well, why are customers there? What is the connection with the customers? And there is a piece around buying social, right? But it's a little bit, it's the thing to keep in mind that customers are still making their decisions based on price and quality, and the social piece can push you over the edge. So you always want to keep a thought of, well, why are our customers here? And we talk about different ways in which organizations are sort of blending together the social and entrepreneurial. And the thing to think about is, where do you fall sort of in that landscape? So are they buying social? Which is important to some people, but you could also lose customers if, for example, they could get the same service from traditional business or better service from traditional business, right? Like thinking about those pieces. So thinking about how or why your customer is there and what you're offering them. And then on the other side is then thinking about, what additional costs is my social model adding to my business that my competitors don't have to bear? So are there pieces, so the fact that you potentially are donating or giving these flowers to hospital workers, I don't 100% know what your plans are in that way. But for example, if you were donating them, that's a cost your business is going to have to bear. So are your customers willing to pay enough that there's not a funding gap? And if there is a funding gap, how do you overcome it? So thinking about sort of those two pieces coming together. And then we just talked about, so this is the Jane just mentioned, but like when you start thinking about, well, why are your customers there? So that price and quality thing is, we always use the example of a cup of coffee. So the cup of coffee might have the most amazing social story behind it, but if it's a crappy cup of coffee, nobody's coming back a second time. So thinking about really what's driving the customer to be there, if the goal is for them to help like offset some of the social mission costs, right?
No, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I do like the coffee cup analogy. I think that definitely puts it into perspective. But yeah, these are definitely kind of the next stage for us, is doing like we're kind of very close to the strategy right now. We have been in the position of both being someone who would be a user and a client. And so we've been able to kind of understand the market a little bit, but our next stage is definitely having these conversations with more the customer than the user. We know that, to your point, the users will be there, we think, but the customer is really where we need to focus our more intensive kind of market research before we blast things out to the world. So I appreciate that reinforcement.
But also don't forget about the beneficiary, right? Or the client. Don't forget about them, because what you offer to them is going to be key, because you want to provide them with something of value, but also it could impact your costs, right? Like there could be something that you're doing. So it's that whole balance thing. And the more closely your social and entrepreneurial model are connected, the less pressure points you're probably going to have to deal with.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And for me specifically, not to keep dragging on, but for me, I've been much closer to the social side the entire time. And this is something that's a little bit more balanced in that way that we're planning. So yeah, I feel like we have a greater understanding of that side. And that's why the focus on the customer and being able to make it something that has sustainable revenue is kind of the bigger part of the planning and the data acquisition for us right now. But yeah, I totally understand the balance. So thank you.
Jeff, did you want to expand on the little comment you popped in the chat there?
I was curious, Jack, just to ask a question and it may hopefully help clarify your own thinking too, and hearing that you're more on the social side. What's the driver for a new business and a new garden versus using sort of that? It sounds like the assets in some ways that you were a part of already creating from a garden standpoint in the city.
Yeah, great question. So we see it as because we have the chance to start affecting land that is just basically greenfield space right now with no development, that we can offer people a real lesson and a workshop in helping us build and literally shovels in the ground, build the operation with us over time. And then that's part of the workshop then, is to understand in a holistic way, even to a certain extent, this is kind of meta for this conversation, but to even understand how we approach starting a social enterprise and why we went down that road. But really, in the nuts and bolts, we think that people will be more interested in having the chance to make kind of permanent change in the city via actually making the beds themselves, physically planting, the trees and the shrubs, and seeing it 2, 3, 10 years later down the road, and really having that connection to the space. And that's where we think that we differentiate on some of the projects that, that I mentioned that I've been part of earlier.
I'm also just going to jump in really quick. Jack, it was really good to see you again, buddy. I'm glad to see you on the call. I'm just going to drop, I need to run, but I wanted to poke all the ecosystem supporters on the call. Jack and his partner, Diane, their idea is really cool. They're kind of in this interesting space where they're not yet operational. They've got together a slide deck and an initial business plan. So they're not really quite in need of startup training. And so I know this is kind of this weird middle space that some of the providers on the call provide programs and supports to. I thought this might be a good spot where everyone could just throw out what resources Jack and Diane could have access to. On that note, I'm going to stop filling up the chat with my horrible jokes. Jack, good seeing you again, the cleanest farmer in Calgary. Have a good day, everyone. I'm Phil with Be Local. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Phil. Good to see you again. All right. I think Phil needs to host this going forward, Dan. I'm out. Phil's the new host because I feel like there'll be a lot more laughter if we get him in. So if we need to add someone into the rotation.
He's a star that burns out too fast.
Well, maybe we can add him as like the special edition rotation just to add some.
He'd be like your color commentator.
Perfect. Love it. We'll just kind of tag team.
Jack, and I appreciate obviously that you sound like you're kind of in iteration mode and a lot of ideas. From some of the models you talked about, it sounds pretty similar to other ones that we've heard across Canada. A huge believer in tracking down those models, seeing what you can learn from them, and even what resources they access for funding and other things like that, and programming. So if your real focus is tracking down programming that can assist you, speaking to other similar models in other provinces in Canada might help. In fact, there was one that's, and I forget the name of it, Brittany, I don't know if you remember, it's in Winnipeg, where they do have farming and they provide the experience for both, I think, children and others. She's frantically Googling it. So we'll put that in the chat, but that's just one possible lead if you're not aware of them. Again, big believer in learning from those who are already doing it, and insights also obviously in terms of customers, right? And pricing.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. We have looked into some other models across the country. We've seen other people doing similar-ish things at different scales, and kind of it feels like it was actually really helpful because it felt like we were already could be kind of part of an ecosystem. There's like, I don't know if anyone's heard of the care farm movement in Europe, but like literally thousands of farms offering very specific but different services. And so we're starting to see that come to Canada and North America. And so there are some very interesting people that we're going to reach out to. But yeah, it's definitely something we're going after. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your questions, Jack, and sharing a little bit about. Jeff, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, Jack, I would just say after hearing a bit more about the concept and your answer to my previous question, I would say really focus on the business side. Like if you gravitate towards like how to have the social impact, like keep your focus on like how will you make money in a relatively sustainable way. And remember, you need to make money both to get by and ultimately to get ahead. So like that's the shift, is you got to be starting to think about, like if you come from a nonprofit, you're thinking surplus. If you're for profit, you're thinking profit. So just remember it's costs and then plus, because if you don't have that plus, it's really hard to make it sustainable over the long term to like keep reinvesting in the business. So as soon as you said like you're looking at engaging people in building the gardens, and I was thinking, oh, okay, like that means you build one garden, then you got to find another garden, you got to engage people in it. Like, so to keep it simple, like the simpler your model is, the better chance you have to like keep your costs contained and then be able to make money, which is like totally not what Momentum does. We don't pay attention to we know our costs, but we don't keep them contained, and we don't simplify our business very well. But it's really important that you really think about like, what's the service you're going to be providing and to whom, and to make it as simple as possible so you can have repetitive revenue. Right? You think of a coffee shop, just to go back to that analogy, like you're serving coffee every day. It's like the same product and then the general same service. So you can get like consistency in terms of like what you're offering and then what those costs are. It makes it a lot easier to track the costs to then know what you have to price so you can actually then make money. So just like really focus on the business side, because if you come from the more social side and that's where your heart lies, it's really easy to go that way and then harder to make it actually sustainable from a profit standpoint.
Meredith, I think you had something?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of different things. First of all, really appreciate the Jack and Diane given the song. Someone who dated someone named Derek at the height of Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, and like also +1 for good trade. Yeah, and so I'd maybe just like to recognize first of all, like I think that some of the conversation that's been generated has not really it wasn't your original intent in asking the question, but I think that you've sourced a lot of really great feedback and just been really like gracious in accepting that, which I think is a really powerful entrepreneurial trait. So just sort of wanted to name that. Thanks for engaging in this conversation with all of us. Yeah, and I think like to Phil's question around like what sort of entrepreneurial or ecosystems supports are there out there? I think there's actually lots. It sounds like you have a really like a good foundation to like work from and provide feedback from, right? Both based on your like experience in sort of similar industries, and it sounds like you've got sort of like either a business plan or perhaps like a completed business model canvas or something like that. And so I think like you do have something tangible to take into these conversations to work with, which I think is really, really powerful, and that it's like, it's more than just an idea. Yeah, so just sort of wanted to provide that insight and maybe provide a little bit of appreciation too.
Thanks, Meredith.
Do you
All
think,
right.
I was just wondering if I could say something?
Yes.
So I am a regular farmer, not a urban farmer. And we farm quite in the northwest of Edmonton. So, but we also have been in business for like 40 some years. So we also sell a lot of our products into Calgary restaurants. So we're kind of, in with some of the top chefs in Calgary, et cetera. But what I find interesting is that I've been trying to teach my grandchildren about gardening. And so I use anything that happens to be available in the yard. And when I said I wanted raised flower beds, my husband brought in used silage feeders from the field. And they are now my potato planters, and I have potatoes in them, and I have broccoli in them, but then we had an old hot tub that died. So we took it and filled it with dirt, and I have got turnips in it and flowers, dahlias, and all kinds of things. And then I have these ginormous tractor tires that I also filled with dirt. And they're growing peas and flowers in the middle and all these things. So I got really excited when you started to talk about urban farming, because I thought, well, maybe it's going to take all these old things that people don't want anymore and grow things. But the other piece to it too, I guess, that I was thinking about, I'm a little unclear about the healthcare piece. I understand about the food part because, fresh food, et cetera. But I'm thinking about the hospitals and facilities in Calgary, and I've sat on several hospital like boards and different things, healthcare boards and things like that around the province. So, but I'm thinking in terms of, you have like in rural areas, we call them hospital auxiliaries, but in the cities, they're, the friends of or something like that, where they run the gift store and the services for the patients, et cetera. But, marrying up with those kinds of organizations to help provide the social benefit aspect may be another opportunity for you if you're trying to move in that direction. But kudos to you anyway. I'm glad to see that the gardening is well and good in the cities. Also, I do work for the government, so I am an Alberta culture person, and we do have the crowdsourcing program that I just helped do a pilot for in December, actually, November. And our groups that we took the pilot lab have been raising money now for their projects for the last 4 weeks. And they're doing really well. And I think the extra training has really helped. So Dan, you would be happy to hear a little bit about that anyway. I know that you and Jasmine had talked about it a bit, and Brittany. And it's good to see you both here again. And hi, Jane. Anyway, I will be quiet now. And but if I can help in any way, certainly feel free to contact me.
Thanks, Debbie. Great to see connections happening in the AMAASE room. Always lovely. Are there any other questions? I know we have Jack, did you get your questions answered? Are you good? Did you have any other last thoughts?
No, that's fantastic. I really appreciate everybody's time. This has been very, very useful. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Does anyone else have any other questions? I know I did get one in the, Julie had thrown a if there was time chat, but I did want to open the floor before we get to that one. I don't see any hands. So Julie had put in the chat, and Julia, I don't know if you want to turn your camera on and ask, but it was around what % of the budget we want to dedicate to social media. So do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we have people that already have shown interest, and actually we did some work kind of for this already during the summer, and we have some more interest. But obviously we want to continue to kind of cast a wider net and not just work with people that already know what we kind of are offering for this. So now I've been involved in social media work and things like that for years. And just I've often seen that when these sorts of things, when the advertising, not just social media, but advertising and kind of reaching out, etc., a lot of times like it doesn't seem really well thought out, or it's I think I made the kind of correlation of it like candy floss. It has no real sort of substance. So it's really easy for people to kind of, get, or not be interested, right? So obviously there has to be a clever combination of course, the social media aspect, but other ways of reaching out. So one of the things, like I mentioned, that I do is I've got the YouTube videos that are kind of like the micro learnings that we're kind of showing employers, like, here's some things we've helped people with before, and that has a little bit more substance. But how do we, like, in your opinions and experience, how do you create like an advertising campaign or reaching out, etc., where there is a lot more substance, and it isn't just like, like nationwide warehouse, everything must go. Like, we don't want it to be like that, right? So we actually want it to be really much in keeping with who we are as an agency. But again, this is branching off formally in another direction, even though we've been doing this for years and years. So I just wanted to get your impression about how good social media has been done for the beginnings and sustainability of a social enterprise, right?
Thanks, Julie. Anyone want to take a go with that?
I'm going to, of course, ask a question. Then Meredith has got her hand up, so I'll be quick. For me, a communications question is not how do we make social media? It's how do we get the message that we want to put across to the people that need to hear the message? And then it becomes an exercise at looking what the platform is that's most appropriate in the middle. It may not be social media. There may be other better ways to get to the people that you're talking about. And I think people leap over that process and think, oh, we got to do social media. And it may not be the right answer for your question. So.
Yeah, and my comment was maybe a combination of a couple of the comments that have already been said, as just when we're thinking about like marketing, I think it's important to like think about the strategy first and then go on to like the tactics or the channels or what sort of makes sense like as a tool to get that message out. And so as a starting place, I'd say like what really is the story that you're looking to tell, and what sort of like strategy is in alignment with sort of your brand values. And so, yeah, would maybe just like encourage you to like ask a different question as a starting place.
I'm trying to unmute. My dog is coughing in the background, so I apologize. I think there's that other key piece, and I think we've talked about it a few times today, around that piece around, who can help you learn. So who can act as friendly wise skeptics, who can act as giving you some ideas, because that piece around the power of having almost like advocates that are in the industry that you're trying to get into, or the groups that you're trying to get into. So if a group is able to learn with you and then they're willing to help advocate your offering, that's like really big. And so it's something to think about, even as you move from maybe like early adopters, so the people who are willing to learn with you, and then you start going to larger audiences. What are those things that you need to learn? And also, how can they help you kind of propel through that? So maybe social media isn't the way to get in with these organizations that you're targeting would know best, or similar type organizations. So learning from them is probably a really powerful step that you can take to ensure that you understand the best tool in which to access.
People
So
sometimes.
just for clarification, like, so because I think that's a real light bulb kind of moment, because I think we were working with organizations and saying what kind of questions you would have, what would the things that you want to be, and focusing so much on that, but not so much on, you know, what's the best way to kind of, you know, make you aware of those things. So you're saying like it could be in something like a monthly newsletter, it could be in a lunch and learn or something like that. So a lot more casting a bit of a wider net is what you're saying.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it could even be going into the office and talking with whoever makes the decision, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Ask them how they find stuff out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice.
And I will say, like, we talked about sort of that conversion rate, like customers, people saying they'll do it, is I worked with a lot of organizations, maybe like 10, 8, 9, oh my gosh, I'm dating myself, 10 years ago with Trico. And there was a big push for nonprofits and charities to go in and teach corporate Calgary what they knew, right? Because they're doing amazing things. So I'm going to sell it to corporate Calgary. And it actually, a lot of them didn't go forward. And that's because there was a change in the economy, right? Corporate Calgary couldn't pay for these things. And one of the things that I've been hearing recently for some groups is that often sort of these corporations are actually looking for somebody who can do it all, right? So, hey, we want you to look at inclusivity across the organization, whether it's with newcomers or with LGBTQ plus communities. We're looking for those things. So that's really important feedback for you to know as well, is what are these people that we're targeting, who are they looking for, and what types of programs are they looking for, right? And then how do we potentially being able to foster some of those people who are willing to learn with you, that then act as advocates and can go to these partners and be like, no, actually, we learned a ton, right? Like, this was actually a really valuable project for us. And this is why, right?
Build on Brittany's points, I totally agree. I think priority number one would be finding organizations where you're really impressed with the effectiveness of the communication and learn as much as you can from them. But in addition to that, there's actually a lot of programs on enhancing communication, so much so that you have to be careful because you probably spend all your time looking at them. I think ATB offers some stuff and Business Links offers some stuff. And Brittany, I don't know if you've heard of other ones who offer them, but they might be a good start if you're looking at possible training programs.
Yeah, I know Platform Calgary does some stuff too, I think, around sort of customer discovery and like marketing in that piece.
Great. We have a bit of a lull. Julie, did that kind of help out? Did that answer your question? Great. Rob, do you want to unmute and share your question?
Absolutely. Sorry for showing up late here. Really wanted to join from the start. So many familiar faces and people I'm overdue for a catch up with. But yeah, interested to get some perspectives from, I mean, these are some of the leading organizations in this space. And I know ABC, I'm not fully up to date on all the work that they're doing. But I'd love to get insight into what everybody's thoughts is on how we can get more youth interested in social entrepreneurship and pursuing this and actual, and like what do you see as some of the key barriers to youth pursuing careers as social entrepreneurs? And then maybe lastly, what we can collectively do to like solve that for them, if you wanna venture a response.
I'll start, but I hope Dan will jump into this as well. Is one of the things that we're seeing is we are seeing more youth interested in this, and especially like the social aspects and how you can do good while moving your business forward. I think the key thing is sort of laying that groundwork around, we talk a lot about the potential of social entrepreneurship and this idea that there's no one way in order to have impact, and there's different ways that you can have impact, because sometimes it can be a little bit of a closed door. Oh, well, this is social enterprise, this isn't social enterprise. And sort of the way that we've been really looking at it is, there's different ways to have impact, right? And if you've got impact as a goal, that's really cool. And you can move your idea forward. And the other thing is really helping organizations and youth or individuals understand, like, you don't have to do it all day one. Like, that can be very overwhelming. So you don't have to do it all day one. It can evolve and change over time. And you also don't have to do it by yourself. So whether it's you're living in a community, and so whether it's sort of stakeholders that you can have camaraderie with, you work in a system, there's other organizations that are dealing with that social issue as well. How can you learn from the customers and the beneficiaries, what has been done? All those pieces really come to be that important. But I think that education piece around, like, how do we kind of get the idea that there's so much potential in this space, so many different ways you can do impact, and different ways that you can go about this. I think that piece is really core in terms of encouraging more youth to get involved in this space. And then that helps in terms of, like, universities developing courses on this, or high schools developing courses on it, right? There's all those pieces. But Dan can talk more about it because he does more post-secondary education work than I do.
Sure, happy to jump in. So paradoxically, we're seeing like two fundamental challenges when it deals with getting youth engaged in social entrepreneurship. One is this attitude of, capitalism's greed, it's evil, why would I even bother? And it's awakening them to the possibility of what capitalism could actually be and how business models can actually serve needs. And it's just weird. There's this danger of, if the people that really care about this stuff are the ones that refuse to get involved, who's going to be left for running capitalism? It's the one that are driven by profit motive. So trying to talk people and get them to realize the possibility and how they can actually control this narrative if they want capitalism to be about more than just profit maximization. And the second one, ironically, is the other half that actually, I totally get it. Why would I ever separate the idea of social impact and profit? I want to combine them. Like I want to have both. And there we got to be very careful not to waste their time of selling them on this idea, but actually telling them the how, which again, as Brittany says, we've tried to really focus on a curriculum that's it inspires us the possibilities, but it's very practice focused and empowers with specific tools. So we're actually, ironically enough, as Brittany said, we're in a number of post-secondary institutions now where we're introducing students to it. One of the joys of my job is actually seeing students go through the program, and you can see the wheels starting to turn as to the possibilities of what they can do with social entrepreneurship and using the tools. So again, we're looking at now maybe expanding that to taking it to students before they get to university and get them at a younger age. So thank you for the question. It's very top of mind for us, and we're actually excited about trying to kind of move that initiative forward.
Jeff, and then Meredith.
Meredith, you go first.
Yeah, I also think this is a really important question, and think that there's maybe a couple of like paradoxes at play here. One of them being, like, I have read studies that talk about youth as being just like incredible systems and design thinkers, more so than any other like generation in the past. Sort of gripping the complexities of the world in a different way, which lends itself really well to solving social problems. And there is also, sort of on the other side of this paradox, this situation where we have youth who are sort of coming into like our post-secondary system and into careers who don't really see entrepreneurship broadly as a viable career choice. And so, in in this question, I sort of like hold those two things in tension and ask sort of like what do we do as an ecosystem to both like expose this as a viable path for youth and also create sort of other alternative pathways into social entrepreneurship that are like that have less sort of like barriers to entry into them. So those are the, yeah, just sort of the two things that come to mind for me.
I was just thinking, about the question about youth, and I used to teach junior achievement in the high schools when I was gazillion years ago anyway, and helping students set up their own businesses and run them for the summertime and things like that. And I don't think that at that time, the whole aspect of having anything social associated with those businesses was even on the horizon. So maybe we need to go back and look at some of the younger learning programs and see if that aspect has been incorporated into them. And maybe that's where we start. I mean, maybe it's too old and it's not a good idea, but I think we need to start before they get to the university stage. And I don't know, that's my thinking, but.
Thanks, Debbie, for sharing that. It's actually really interesting because I've had a couple conversations recently about that topic. Sorry, it's that time of night. On youth and social entrepreneurship. And this is one of those areas where the ABC part of my brain is very keen to be like, oh, I think there's a conversation here. And Meredith, maybe even a curious conversation themed around this specific topic, which is now becoming very top of mind. So stay tuned. That's all I can say, because once those seeds get planted in my brain, I tend to try and do something with them. Jeff, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I was curious actually, Rob, what you think could be done, since you have lots of background in it. So I kind of was curious to just turn the question around on you. But my one thought I'd share is that I think we have to be a little bit patient, because think of like at Mount Royal University and the social innovation program or course within the business school. It's like what, 5-ish years old, ish. Haskane, and actually having like social enterprise focused learning within Haskane is only, I don't know, you technical folks know better, but like 6-ish years old. And so, and like that's introducing that at the post-secondary level. And to Debbie's point and Dan's point, like, yeah, maybe it should be earlier. I remember, I think I took, so long ago, it's so fuzzy, I think I took a business class in high school. It was like an option class, and for sure it wasn't on the radar then because that was so long ago, but probably isn't in those kind of business option classes at high schools now, or in things like junior achievement. But I do think like it's coming, because I've heard from people at Mount Royal that the social innovation class within the business school is one of the most high demand courses in the entire school. And then I just heard the other day from a Haskane MBA grad who said that they were for the first time exposed to the idea of social enterprise only 2 or 3 years ago. And so that's someone that if they had done their MBA 15 years ago, probably wouldn't have been exposed to it at all. And then probably would have, and they're not working in a traditional business direction. And 10 or 15 years ago, maybe they would have done their MBA and gone more the more traditional business route. So I do think it's coming. It's just because of some of the progress we've made within the local post-secondaries anyways, and other post-secondaries across Canada. And then maybe we just have to go younger.
I'm too old to be patient anymore. I mean, it goes to the route we went down. The Chicago School of Business has got a lot to answer for when it decided to teach us all that the most important thing was dividends paid to shareholders. And it's how do we get back to the kind of thinking Dan was referencing about, that it's the great divide has got to be somehow brought together. Yes, teaching people about social entrepreneurship is really important, but why is it a different thing, right? Why isn't it just that business has a social responsibility in community? That to me is when we'll really get there. But in the meantime, yes, we'll do these things, but I want the bigger goal. quite frankly. I hope that there's a time when we don't need a social enterprise fund because any investor gets it and does the right thing in the community. But we're not there yet. So.
Well, as someone with children who are 16 and 14, I say let's hurry up so that these youth have those options. Dan, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, Rob, just before you address Jeff's question to you, should you so choose, Scotland has actually mandated, first jurisdiction, that every single school child will have exposure to social enterprise curriculum, which they hope to actually have achieved in, I think, 2 years. And Social Enterprise Academy is one of the leaders in that initiative, and we're trying to learn all we can from them.
Yeah, I think that would be the ultimate goal. If we get, as long as it was good social enterprise content, I think there's a big difference between trite and not, I think, and maybe limited narratives of what social enterprise is versus what I think it truly is. And yeah, just answer Jeff, it's always something that I think about a lot. For those who don't know, the League of Innovators is a national charity that runs free acceleration programs for youth entrepreneurs across Canada. And I'm the director of acceleration programming now there, and oversee like about 3 programs that have about 300 entrepreneurs coming through them. And some founders come in, like an amazing one from Calgary, like Retina Logic, like they just come in with an awesome like example, and then they want to do that, and then we're just like trying to embed it into our programming, and really like foster conscious leadership and do that work. And so I have a bunch of theories as to how to do that. I think getting real life examples, I think we need to stop using like these big unrelatable examples, and share real local youth entrepreneurs that are doing things more often. I think we need to do a better job like promoting and giving them a platform, because I think that's like the best way to inspire people to do something is for them to see it and kind of like relate to it. And so just starting to look back now at like how do we increase the funnel size rather than just focus all of our effort on the few that are there, like how do we increase the funnel? And so I'm starting to look at what that looks like in Calgary, and applying what the League of Innovators is really good at, which is inspiring youth and giving them, I think this is like a fundamental issue that we don't promote entrepreneurship amongst our youth in Canada. And that's why we lose a lot of our best entrepreneurs to other startup ecosystems, predominantly the States. And so we need to do a better job, I think, promoting entrepreneurship amongst our youth, but then particularly conscious or social entrepreneurship. And I think one of the best ways to do that would be to like do a better job promoting the youth that are already doing it to youth that are just like kind of come up behind them. So if anybody's interested in talking more about that, yeah, it's kind of like a goal for next year is to start figuring out how like what we do at the league and what we're really good at could really apply to the ecosystem here in Calgary that I know so well. So I'll put my email in the thing.
Thanks, Rob. And I will connect with you as well, because I'd love to share a bit more about what ABC is working on in a few different areas. So, okay, with that, we will begin to wrap up and hopefully see you and your colleagues next month. So please share the links. It'll get sent out soon for the January. And I don't have a calendar in front of me. There we go, January 11th. Thanks, Omar. So you have all Christmas and holiday season to think of your questions and write them down. Before we close, I do like to give an opportunity for our panelists to share any updates from their organizations and any closing thoughts they might have on today's session. And then if attendees have anything they want to share, we welcome you to post anything in the chat around events or things that are coming up. So I'll just do a round of each panelist and then we'll finish up for the day. Jeff, do you want to get us started?
I can, yep. So I will put one program that's available to anyone. It's one of the programs where we don't screen as much based on income or employment status. So that's our Design Your Business program. And it could also be called Design Your Business for Impact, because it's really focused on profit and purpose. And that idea, similar to the Trico idea of blending. So that one is, we have a intake coming up in late January, I believe. So that's one to have on the radar. And then sort of on Phil's behalf is that we're doing lots of planning for Be Local so that we can keep the focus on local, but move it even more towards more of a focus on local businesses that are really focused on their social impact. So that's our plan, is to kind of go deeper with local businesses that really want to ramp up their social impact, and take some of the lessons learned from Social Venture Institute that we've hosted for a number of times with lots of people that are involved in this call, and take some of that spirit and apply it more all year round, and still have SVI be a signature event, but that spirit of peer learning and being able to learn from people and other businesses, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, that have gone down the journey that maybe is somewhat similar to themselves. So that's our plan with Be Local in the future too.
Thanks, Jeff. Meredith.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll just say, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I've attended these as a participant before, but this is my first time participating on the panel. So yeah, really appreciate all of your graciousness. In terms of things to share, so I work with Innovate Calgary. We are launching the Social Innovation Hub soon. We have a launch date set for January 31st. And so I'll just put a link to the Social Innovation Hub in the chat. What this is effectively is sort of a collision point of campus and community assets, sort of part co-working space, maker space. We house a lot of social enterprise and innovation training programs out of there. Sort of support social innovators towards receiving their first investment, offer a lot of community and sort of network building programming out of the Social Innovation Hub as well. So yeah, would encourage folks to check it out. And we're sort of testing a few things throughout the rest of December and into January. And then yeah, are hoping to really open our doors and welcome people in February. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Meredith. Jane.
First of all, thank you all for the conversation. It's always interesting to hear what people are obsessing about and bring to the table. So I appreciate that. We don't have any programs. We're boring. We just have money. So if you need money, let's talk. But other than that, have a wonderful holiday season, and I look forward to next year.
Thanks, Jane. Dan?
So when we talked about our December edition of AMAASE, which is, by the way, our first ever December edition, Christine had the idea we should wear Santa hats, which obviously we haven't done. But I thought I would honor Christine's wonderful idea and the season with a very, very brief reading from A Christmas Carol. And what I'm going to read is the scene where Scrooge is haunted by the ghost of his former partner, Marley. So Scrooge says, "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob." "Business?" cried the ghost, wringing his hands. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." Now I read this for a number of reasons. It's my favorite quote from A Christmas Carol, but also this was written in 1843. So 180 years ago, Charles Dickens nailed the heart of social entrepreneurship. So that's like how long we've been talking about this. The second aspect is, in that passage, he does a very clever thing in that when you hear business, I bet most of you think of trade or commerce. But business can also mean what you care about, as in mind your own business or taking care of business. And I think we've forgotten that. We've forgotten the incredible choice that is business, the choice of what we care about. And it's not the only conversation, but one of the great conversations about social entrepreneurship is reawakening the realization that we have choice of what we care about in our business models and how we can inspire people to both live that and explore that idea as I say, is one of the great conversations that we can have about social entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Dan. I think that should become a new tradition. And I'm really sorry, Brittany, you have to follow that up. If I'd known, I would have put him last, but I got nothing.
Come to
That was
every
lovely. Thanks,
meeting.
Dan.
Every meeting I have with Dan, just, you know. Yeah, I'm just gonna put a link in the chat box to our tools. I've already sent it out. Available 24/7. Most of them are online, free. Check them out if you're looking at sort of how you're bringing together the social and the entrepreneurial within your organization.
Thanks, Brittany. And I'm just going to throw two quick links in the chat. One for AMAASE, which is our online, which is our online resource navigation tool for social entrepreneurs that we have recently launched and are very regularly adding new resources to. So you can either suggest a resource if you know one, or find one if you're looking for one, as well as our social entrepreneur LinkedIn group for those social entrepreneurs looking to connect with ABC'd and with other social entrepreneurs. And with that, I just want to give a big thank you and happy holidays and happy festive season to all of our attendees and our panelists who have attended, and Meredith and Jeff for kind of jumping right in as new panelist members today and contributing very meaningfully to the conversation. So thank you all so much. And with that, I will let you get to your evening.